The subway was nearly empty except for the flickering lights overhead and the distant sound of a saxophonist playing for a few spare coins. Keanu Reeves pulled his hood tighter over his head, trying to blend in as he waited for the train. He had always loved taking the subway at odd hours. No cameras, no fans, just raw humanity. That's when he saw it. A tattered notebook sat abandoned on one of the metal benches. The pages were sticking out, curled and dirty, as if it had been through a storm. Something about it felt important. Keanu glanced around. No one seemed to notice it. It was as if the notebook didn't exist to anyone else. Curious, he picked it up and flipped to the first page, and his breath caught in his throat. Inside were detailed sketches, formulas, and blueprints. Not just any sketches, but futuristic technology decades ahead of its time. Concepts about artificial intelligence, sustainable energy, and even a revolutionary rocket design that looked more advanced than anything SpaceX had built. His hands tightened around the notebook. Who the hell wrote this? Then, on the last page, written in shaky, almost unreadable handwriting, were 5 haunting words. Elon Musk, you stole it. Keanu stared at the words. Elon Musk, you stole it. A chill ran down his spine. Was it a joke? A desperate attempt to get attention? Or was there truth behind it? He flipped through more pages. The handwriting was uneven, sometimes neat, sometimes frantic, as if written during moments of extreme emotion. But what truly disturbed him wasn't the accusation against Musk. It was the sheer brilliance of the ideas inside. Whoever wrote this notebook wasn't just smart. They were a visionary. Keanu clenched the notebook in his hands, his mind racing. There was only one person who could confirm if any of this was real. Sitting in a quiet cafe near the subway station, Keanu pulled out his phone and dialed a number few people had direct access to. The call rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Keanu? This is unexpected. Elon Musk's voice was calm, but there was always an undercurrent of curiosity, as if he was already thinking 10 steps ahead. Elon, I need you to see something. Keanu's voice was low, serious. And I need you to be honest with me. There was a pause. That sounds ominous. Should I be worried? Keanu exhaled. Just meet me at my place, tonight. Elon Musk sat in Keanu's dimly lit living room, his fingers running over the aged, torn pages of the notebook. His eyes darted across the scribbled formulas, the sketches, the theories. The longer he read, the quieter he became. Then, after several minutes, he set the notebook down, leaned back, and let out a slow breath. Where did you get this? Elon's voice had lost its usual confidence. Keanu crossed his arms. That's what I was hoping you'd tell me. Elon hesitated. He picked up the notebook again, flipping to the final page where the words were written. Elon Musk, you stole it. His expression darkened. He wasn't just surprised. He looked shaken. Keanu leaned forward. Elon, does any of this look familiar to you? A long silence. Then, finally, Elon Musk whispered something Keanu never expected. I think I know who wrote this. Keanu's heart pounded. Elon Musk knew something. Who wrote this? Keanu demanded. Elon ran a hand over his face, looking more tired than Keanu had ever seen him. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the notebook, as if it were a ghost from his past. Then, finally, he spoke. His name was Victor Kessler. Keanu had never heard the name before. Who is he? Elon exhaled slowly. Not who he is, who he was. Elon set the notebook down on the coffee table, his fingers tapping against the cover. Victor Kessler was a physicist. Not just any physicist, he was a genius. The kind of mind that comes once in a century, maybe once in human history. Keanu's brow furrowed. Then why have I never heard of him? Elon's lips tightened. Because no one was supposed to. Keanu frowned. What do you mean? Elon leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. 15 years ago, before Tesla became what it is now, before SpaceX was launching rockets, I was still just a guy trying to build the future. Victor was already years ahead of me. So you knew him personally? Elon nodded. For a short time. He was reclusive, but his ideas were unbelievable. He had theories about quantum energy storage, AI, and space travel that were at least 50 years ahead of their time. He even came up with a propulsion system that could— Elon stopped himself, his jaw clenched. Keanu narrowed his eyes. What happened? A long silence. Then, in a low voice, Elon said, "He disappeared." Keanu sat back, stunned. Disappeared? What do you mean? Like he left? Went off grid? Elon shook his head. One day he was here, the next day he was gone. No one could find him. No paper trail, no family to ask. It was like he was erased. Keanu looked down at the notebook in front of them. His fingers traced over the edges of the torn pages. And now, years later, this just shows up in a subway station? Elon nodded slowly. Which means Victor might still be alive. A strange silence filled the room. The weight of those words pressed down on them both. Keanu finally spoke. Then we need to find him. Keanu wasn't the type to let a mystery rest, and neither was Elon. Within hours, Elon had his best researchers, analysts, and private investigators working on finding anything they could about Victor Kessler, but every search led to a dead end. No known address, no government records, no bank accounts, no digital footprint. It was as if Victor Kessler had never existed. But then, Keanu had an idea. "We're looking in the wrong places," he said. "If Victor's alive, he's not living like a scientist. He's living like someone who doesn't want to be found." Elon looked at him. "You think he's homeless?" Keanu nodded. "And if he is, we need to start looking in the streets." Elon considered it for a moment, then stood up. "Then let's go find him." For the first time in years, the richest man in the world and one of Hollywood's most beloved actors walked through the back alleys and forgotten corners of the city. They spoke to street vendors, shelter workers, and anyone who might have seen an older man with wild, brilliant ideas written in notebooks. Most people had no answers. Some shook their heads. Some laughed. But then, after hours of searching, they met an old woman selling newspapers outside a 24-hour diner. She eyed the notebook in Keanu's hands and muttered, "You looking for the crazy man who talks about rockets?" Both Keanu and Elon froze. Keanu stepped forward. "You know him?" the woman cackled. "Know him? Hell, he owes me 3 sandwiches. He sleeps by the old train yard under the bridge, talks to himself, writes in his books, looks like he ain't showered in years." Elon swallowed. "That sounds like Victor." Keanu's pulse quickened. "Can you take us to him?" The woman squinted at them. "What's in it for me?" Keanu smirked. "A lifetime supply of sandwiches." She grinned, pocketing a few crumpled bills. "Come on, boys. I hope you're ready for a ghost." Minutes later, Keanu and Elon stood in the darkness beneath the bridge near the train yard. A few homeless people were scattered in sleeping bags, their silhouettes barely visible in the dim street lights. Then, in the farthest corner, they saw him. A frail man with wild, unkempt gray hair sat hunched over a pile of papers. He muttered to himself, scrawling equations with a broken pencil. His clothes were filthy, torn, barely held together. But even in the dim light, his eyes were sharp. Too sharp. Keanu and Elon exchanged a glance. Then Keanu stepped forward and softly said, "Victor?" The old man froze. Slowly he lifted his head. His eyes darted between Keanu and Elon, and then, in a raspy, almost disbelieving voice, he whispered, "You finally found me." Keanu and Elon stood frozen as Victor Kessler's piercing eyes locked onto them. For a man who had been living in the shadows for over a decade, he didn't look confused or afraid. He looked like he had been waiting for this moment. Keanu took a careful step forward. "Victor, do you remember me?" Victor's cracked lips curled into a ghost of a smile. "Number. But I remember him." His eyes flicked toward Elon. Elon stiffened. "We've been looking for you," Victor chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "No, you haven't. You've been looking for what I know." And then his eyes darkened. "You want to know if you stole it?" Elon swallowed hard. "Did I?" Victor stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Sit down, Elon. Let's talk about the future you never should have built." Keanu and Elon lowered themselves onto the cold ground, their backs against the concrete wall. The night air was thick with silence. Victor pulled a torn, crumpled page from his pocket. It was covered in complex equations, similar to the ones in the notebook. He held it up. "You recognize this, don't you?" Elon's jaw tightened. He did. It was an early version of a propulsion system SpaceX had nearly perfected. "This was my design." Victor's voice trembled with an old buried rage. "I showed it to a group of investors 15 years ago. You were in that room." Elon's brow furrowed. You don't remember?" Victor cut him off, his voice sharp. "I wasn't the one wearing a $1,000 suit. I was just the crazy scientist with ideas no one believed in. And then, 2 years later, your company, your vision, was based on principles I created." Keanu glanced at Elon, but Musk's face was unreadable. "Victor," Elon said carefully, "I don't steal ideas. I build on them." Victor laughed, a bitter, painful sound. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Keanu could feel it. There was something Victor wasn't saying. He leaned in. "Victor, what really happened to you? Why did you disappear?" Victor tensed. His fingers twitched around the paper. Then, for the first time, he looked afraid. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because they didn't want me to talk." "Who?" Keanu asked. Victor licked his cracked lips, then leaned closer. "You think Elon is the enemy? You have no idea what's really going on." He glanced around as if someone might be listening. "There was a project, years ago, a secret experiment. I worked on something far beyond anything SpaceX has ever built. But when I realized what it could do," he swallowed hard. "They erased me." Elon frowned. "Who erased you?" Victor's hands trembled. Then, barely audible, he whispered, "The ones who don't want humanity to leave this planet." Keanu and Elon exchanged a glance. Then Victor took a deep breath and said, "I'll show you everything. But if you help me, you need to be ready for what's coming next." Keanu and Elon sat in stunned silence. Victor's eyes darted around, his breath uneven, as if he expected something, to be watching. Finally, Keanu broke the silence. "Victor, what do you mean? Who doesn't want humanity to leave this planet?" Victor exhaled shakily. Then, with one trembling finger, he pointed upward, toward the sky. "They do?" Elon's face hardened. "You mean the government, corporations, or—" Victor shook his head, his eyes filled with something beyond fear. "No, Elon, not the government, not some secret agency." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Something older, something bigger than all of us." Victor took a deep, shuddering breath before continuing. 15 years ago, I was working on a propulsion system, not just for rockets, but for something much greater. It wasn't just about reaching Mars or colonizing space. It was about bending physics itself, moving beyond the limits of what we thought was possible. Elon leaned in, intrigued despite himself. "You're talking about faster-than-light travel?" Victor hesitated. Then he shook his head. Number faster than reality. A heavy silence fell between them. Keanu frowned. I don't understand. Victor glanced at Elon. Tell me, genius, what happens when you push beyond the edge of the universe? What happens when you go farther than anyone is supposed to go? Elon hesitated, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Theoretically, you could discover new physics, something outside our current understanding. Victor smiled grimly. That's what I thought too, until I saw what was waiting for us. Keanu felt a chill crawl up his spine. What do you mean? Victor clutched his head as if reliving a nightmare. I built a machine, a prototype. It worked, only for a few seconds, but it worked. And in those seconds, he looked up at them, his eyes haunted. Something looked back at us. Keanu felt the hairs on his arms rise. Elon sat perfectly still, his sharp mind processing every word, every possibility. Victor, Elon said carefully, what did you see? Victor swallowed. Not what? Who? He took a shaky breath. The moment the machine activated, reality itself rippled. For just a second, we were somewhere else. I don't know if it was another dimension, another layer of reality, or something in between, but in that moment, he clenched his fists. They saw us. Elon frowned. They? Victor shut his eyes as if trying to block out the memory. Something vast, something ancient. I don't have the words, but I know this. It did not want us to leave. Keanu's breath hitched. Victor's voice dropped even lower. And then, I was gone. My research was wiped. My funding was pulled. Every record of my existence was erased. I became nothing. A ghost. Elon shook his head. Who did this to you? Victor opened his eyes, and what he said next changed everything. You did. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Elon's face barely changed, but his fingers curled into his palms. I did? His voice was unreadable. Victor nodded. Not directly, but your companies, your technology, everything you've built is leading to the same thing, the same discovery. Keanu's heart pounded. And if we keep going? Victor's eyes locked onto Elon's. Then they'll erase you, too. A cold wind cut through the alleyway, but it wasn't the chill in the air that sent a shiver down Keanu's spine. It was Victor's words. They'll erase you, too. Elon's expression remained unreadable, but Keanu saw it, the flicker of doubt. Victor took a step closer. Listen to me, Elon. Every breakthrough you make, every new technology you push forward, you're walking the same path I did. And when you get too close to the truth, he gestured to himself. This is what happens. Elon's jaw tightened. I don't let people erase me. Victor's eyes darkened. Neither did I. Elon folded his arms. You're saying that someone, buried your research, that I'm being watched, that if I don't stop, I'll end up like you. Victor nodded. Elon tilted his head. Then tell me something, Victor. If your work was destroyed, how do you still remember it? Keanu's eyes widened at the question. Victor froze, and then, slowly, he smiled. You think they took everything? His voice was barely above a whisper. They took my home, my career, my identity. He reached into the ragged lining of his coat and pulled out a small, rusted key. But they didn't take this. Keanu and Elon leaned in. What is it? Keanu asked. Victor turned the key over in his fingers, his eyes gleaming. Proof. Elon's mind worked fast. A storage unit? A safe house? Victor nodded. My final fail-safe. Before they erased me, I hid everything. The real notes, the blueprints, the formulas. If you really want answers, Musk, follow me. Keanu and Elon exchanged a look, and then, without another word, they followed Victor into the night. They walked for nearly an hour, weaving through the back streets of the city. Victor led them to an abandoned warehouse near the industrial district. Rusted metal, shattered windows. It looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. Victor stopped at a side entrance. "This place used to be one of my private labs. Now it's the last place that holds the truth." He inserted the key into a metal hatch and turned it. Click! The door groaned open. Keanu, Elon, and Victor stepped inside. And then, the lights flickered on. Rows of metal cabinets, old computers, stacks of notebooks, far more than the one Keanu had found. And in the center of the room, a single machine covered by a dusty tarp. Elon's heart pounded. He stepped forward and yanked off the tarp, and what he saw made his breath hitch. It was a prototype, a machine unlike anything he had ever seen. And then Victor whispered, "This is the reason they erased me." Elon ran his fingers over the cold metal. "And what does it do?" Victor locked eyes with him. "It lets you see who's watching us." A heavy silence filled the room. Elon ran his fingers over the machine's surface, his sharp mind analyzing its alien-like design. It was unlike any technology he had ever encountered, sleek but rugged, intricate yet almost organic. Keanu could feel it too. Something about this machine was wrong. Victor's eyes burned with urgency. "Turn it on, Musk. See for yourself." Elon hesitated. And that's when Keanu noticed something. The dust covering the machine. It had been disturbed. Someone else had been here. Recently, Keanu grabbed Victor's arm. "Wait, are you sure this place is safe?" Victor frowned. "No one knows about this place." A loud clunk echoed through the warehouse. Keanu, Elon, and Victor spun around. The door had just locked itself. Then, a metallic voice rang out from an unseen speaker. "Access detected. Unauthorized activation attempt." The room hummed with power. And then, the machine turned itself on. A low vibration filled the air, rattling the walls. Screens flickered to life, displaying symbols that none of them recognized. Elon took a step closer, eyes locked onto the strange readings. "This isn't just a prototype," he murmured. "This thing is operational." Victor paled. It shouldn't be. A holographic interface materialized, casting an eerie blue glow over their faces. Then the screen shifted, and Keanu's breath caught in his throat. It was surveillance footage, thousands of live feeds, cities, streets, boardrooms, space stations, everywhere. Keanu felt his stomach drop. "This is a surveillance system?" Victor shook his head. "No, this is bigger than that." Elon tapped a flashing command on the screen. "Who is watching us?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, the screens filled with a single image, and what they saw made all three men take a step back. It was a face. Not human. Not entirely alien. Something in between. And it was staring right at them. Then it blinked and whispered one word. "Found." The power in the warehouse cut out. The air turned ice cold. And then the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from outside. Victor whipped around. "They're here!" Keanu grabbed him. "Who is here?" Victor's face was pale. "The ones who erased me." Elon's mind raced. He had two choices: run, escape before they were taken. Stay. Activate the machine fully and learn the truth. His pulse hammered. And then the door burst open. Figures in black suits flooded in. Laser sights landed on their chests. A voice boomed, "Step away from the machine." Keanu raised his hand slowly. "We can talk about this, right?" Elon didn't move. His finger hovered over the console. One push, one command, and they would see everything. Victor grabbed his wrist. "Don't. If you do this, there's no turning back." Elon locked eyes with him. There never was. And then he pressed the button. Elon pressed the button, and the world changed. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the machine, flooding the warehouse in a cold, electric blue light. The air shimmered, as if reality itself was unraveling. Keanu felt a strange pull, like something inside him was being yanked toward the machine. The men in black suits froze, their weapons useless. Some clutched their heads, as if in pain. Others stumbled backward, as if an invisible force had hit them. And then the machine spoke. A deep, multi-layered voice echoed through the room. Observation compromised. System override engaged. Elon's hands trembled over the console. He tried to shut the machine down, but it no longer needed him. It was awake. Victor grabbed Elon's shoulder. "What did you do?" Elon's voice was eerily calm. "I think I just asked the wrong question." The screen flickered again. The alien-like face returned, staring at them through the veil of reality itself. And this time, it smiled. Keanu's heart pounded. What the hell is that? Victor's face was sheet white. That's not an it, that's a them. Elon narrowed his eyes. You said they don't want us leaving Earth. Why? Who are they? The machine's voice rippled through the air. We are the architects. Keanu and Elon exchanged a look. Architects of what? Elon demanded. The voice paused, as if amused by the question. Your prison. The warehouse shook. On the monitors, Earth was displayed, but different, thin, glowing veins of energy wrapped around the planet, pulsing like an unseen web. A cage. Keanu's stomach twisted. Are you saying Earth is trapped? The architect's voice was calm, measured, absolute. You were never meant to leave. Your kind was placed here for observation. A test. Elon clenched his jaw. A test for what? A pause. To see if you are worthy? The word sent an icy dread through Keanu's chest. Victor whispered, I told you. Elon's mind raced. His whole life, he had pushed the limits of space travel, dreaming of Mars, of interstellar colonies. But now he saw the truth. We were never supposed to succeed. The architect's voice darkened. And yet, you persist. The screen zoomed in. Live satellite feeds showed SpaceX facilities, Tesla labs, every project Elon had ever touched. Keanu felt his blood turn cold. They had been watching everything, and then the feed changed. It focused on them. A live video feed of the warehouse, a direct real-time broadcast. Keanu's breath hitched. They're watching us right now. Elon's fingers curled into fists. Then let's give them something to watch. He turned to Victor. How do we break out? Victor hesitated. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a second notebook. I have a plan. Victor's hands trembled as he flipped open the notebook, its pages filled with chaotic equations, sketches, and strange symbols. Elon's sharp eyes scanned the writings. Some of it was science. Some of it wasn't. Keanu saw it too. What is this, Victor? This isn't just technology. Victor exhaled slowly. Because our prison isn't just physical, it's woven into the very fabric of our reality. Elon narrowed his eyes. You're saying this is a simulation? Victor shook his head. Not quite. Think of it as an ecosystem, a controlled environment. Keanu ran a hand through his hair. So how do we break the cage? Victor pointed to a specific equation. We don't break it. We overload it. Elon quickly translated Victor's concept. You want to create an energy surge that forces the system to reset itself. Victor nodded. If we hit the right frequency, something beyond their control, the system will glitch, and for a few seconds, the cage will open. Keanu frowned. And then what? Victor's voice lowered. Then we leave. Silence. Keanu felt a pit in his stomach. Leave? Earth? Victor met his gaze. Do you think the architects will just let us stay after what we've seen? Once we force an opening, we either get out or we disappear. Elon's expression was unreadable. Then he smirked. Good. Victor and Keanu blinked. Elon's eyes burned with defiance. I've spent my whole life trying to leave this planet. If this is the only way out, let's do it. Elon and Victor rushed to the console, modifying the machine's interface. The men in black suits were still frozen, trapped in an unseen stasis field, likely a side effect of the machine's activation. Keanu stayed by the door, heart pounding. Something felt wrong. Then he heard it, a faint whisper, not from the machine, but from inside his own mind. You cannot escape. Keanu whipped around, scanning the dark corners of the warehouse. Nothing. But the voice persisted. You were never meant to know. Keanu pressed his hands to his temples. Guys, the voice grew louder. You were never meant to leave. And then the machine let out a piercing, unnatural scream. The lights flickered violently, and the screen flashed with a countdown. 10, 9, 8. Victor's eyes widened. What did you do? Elon stared at the screen. I didn't start the countdown. Victor paled. Then who did? Keanu's pulse thundered. Guys, we need to move. Now. But before they could react, something else happened. The men in suits began to move again, but they weren't men anymore. Their eyes glowed, their forms shifted, and in eerie unison, they all whispered the same words. You were never meant to leave. 7, 6, 5. The countdown raced toward 0, and the warehouse shook like a living thing coming apart at the seams. Keanu, Elon, and Victor stood frozen as the men in black twisted and convulsed, their human forms flickering like a glitching video, their limbs elongated, their faces stretched unnaturally, and their eyes, those glowing, inhuman eyes, locked onto them. You were never meant to leave. Their voices came in unison, but layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. Keanu's breath hitched. Elon, what the hell are they? Elon didn't answer, because he already knew. Victor's hands trembled as he gripped his notebook. They aren't just guards. They're part of the system itself. Elon's jaw clenched. You mean they're not real? Keanu's pulse hammered. That's not real? He pointed at one of the entities, which now had razor-thin fingers curling toward them like knives. Victor shook his head. They're as real as the cage we're in. They exist because we believe they do. Keanu backed away as one of them stepped forward. Then what happens if we stop believing? Victor's eyes widened. That's it. That's how we break free. Elon and Keanu turned to him. What are you saying? Elon demanded. Victor flipped to a page in his notebook, scrawled with an equation Elon had dismissed earlier as nonsense. The system is built on perception. If we reject its rules, we can rewrite them. The moment we stop believing in their power, they lose it. Keanu stared at the nearest entity. It was just inches away, its distorted mouth stretching as if ready to consume him. His heart pounded. Could it really be that simple? 3, 2, believe nothing. See past the illusion, Victor whispered. Keanu made a choice. He closed his eyes, and he let go. The moment Keanu released his fear, the entity in front of him stopped moving. The glow in its eyes dimmed. Then its form flickered, like a broken hologram. Elon caught on immediately. He focused, stealing his mind, rejecting the reality they had been forced to accept. And suddenly, the entire warehouse shifted. The entities froze. The walls wavered. The ground beneath them turned into a swirling, formless void. Keanu opened his eyes, and the warehouse was gone. Everything around them collapsed like shattered glass. For the first time in his life, Keanu Reeves saw what lay beyond reality. They were standing in nothingness. Endless, vast darkness stretched in every direction, yet it was not empty. Massive structures floated in the void, monolithic, ancient, beyond human understanding, and in the center of it all, A colossal eye, miles wide, slowly opened. It saw them, and for the first time, Keanu understood the truth. They had not been fighting to escape. They had been led here, trapped again. And then a deep, endless voice echoed through the void. Welcome to the next level. Keanu, Elon, and Victor stood on nothingness. There was no ground beneath their feet, yet they didn't fall. No air, yet they still breathed. The vast, infinite void stretched before them, and in its center, the colossal eye watched them. It was not just an eye. It was consciousness itself. The moment Keanu met its gaze, he felt something pierce into his mind. Memories flashed, his entire life replayed in a fraction of a second. Not just his memories, but every choice he had ever made, every road he hadn't taken, every version of himself that could have existed. It knew everything. Elon clenched his fists. "What are you?" the voice echoed, ancient and absolute. "We are the architects." Keanu's pulse raced, the same name the machine had spoken. Victor stepped forward. His voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want?" "We do not want. We observe." The eye blinked, slowly, deliberately. "You have broken the illusion. You have passed the test." Keanu, Elon, and Victor exchanged glances. Passed? Elon frowned. Test for what? The darkness around them shifted, and suddenly they saw Earth, but not as a planet, as a construct. Thin, golden threads connected every city, every mind, every life, woven together like a massive living machine. And beyond Earth, there were countless others, endless prison worlds, each running its own test. Keanu's stomach dropped. How many? The eye pulsed. Infinite. Victor's face paled. Elon exhaled sharply. "And what happens to those who don't pass?" A pause. Then, in a voice as cold as the void itself, the architects answered, "They are reset." Keanu's throat went dry. "You mean erased?" "Correct." Elon took a step forward, standing tall against the abyss. "So what now?" His voice was firm, unshaken. "You let us go? Or do we have to fight our way out?" The architects did not laugh, but Keanu could feel their amusement. There is no escape. There is only ascension. Keanu's mind raced. Ascension? The void shimmered. A new vision appeared before them, 3 doors floating in the nothingness. Each door was different. One pulsed with blinding golden light. One was deep, impenetrable black. One was flickering, unstable, changing between realities. The architect spoke. "Choose." Keanu's hands curled into fists. "Choose what?" "Your fate." Elon, Keanu, and Victor stared at the doors, and in that moment, Keanu realized the final twist. This was not just a test of intelligence, not just a test of perception. It was a test of will. If they chose wrong, they would never return. Keanu looked at Elon. Which one? Elon studied the doors, his mind calculating, processing. Victor gripped his notebook, whispering numbers under his breath. The countdown was over, but the real decision was just beginning. Keanu, Elon, and Victor stood before the 3 doors, each radiating an overwhelming presence. The golden door pulsed with warmth, inviting, powerful. It felt like truth, enlightenment, but also control. The black door was the opposite, cold, infinite. It felt like the abyss itself, a place where everything could be erased or perhaps rebuilt. And then there was the flickering door. It was unstable, shifting between realities as if unable to decide whether it should exist. Victor gripped his notebook. "We have one shot at this." Elon exhaled. His mind was already calculating the risks. Keanu's gut told him something deeper was at play. This wasn't just a test of courage, it was a test of understanding. And that's when it hit him. Keanu's eyes widened. These doors aren't choices. They're questions. Elon and Victor turned to him. Think about it. If the golden door represents ultimate truth and power, it's asking, do you seek control? Elon nodded slowly. The black door could be oblivion or total freedom. Do you seek escape? Victor's voice was barely a whisper. And the flickering door. It's unstable. It's not a destination. It's a passage. Keanu took a step toward it. It's asking, do you seek change? The void around them trembled. The architects were watching, waiting, testing them one last time. Elon smirked. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't come all this way just to pick a safe path. Keanu nodded. Victor hesitated, but then, with a determined breath, he followed. Together they stepped toward the flickering door. The moment Keanu's hand touched the handle, reality shattered. The architects' voices rang out, not in words, but in pure thought. You have chosen uncertainty, the unknown, the one path that cannot be controlled. The door swallowed them whole. Keanu's body felt weightless, like falling and flying at the same time. They weren't moving through space. They were moving through possibilities. Flashes of different versions of Earth surrounded them. A world where Elon had built a Dyson sphere around the sun. A world where Keanu had never become an actor, where he was a monk living in isolation. A world where Victor had never written in that notebook, where he was just another lost soul, forgotten in the streets. They weren't just seeing alternate realities. They were seeing the choices they never made. And then they landed. Keanu's feet touched solid ground, sunlight, wind, the sound of distant traffic. They were back? Elon stood beside him, checking his watch. Same time, same date. Victor looked around. The city looked identical, but something felt off. Keanu's heart pounded. Did we actually leave? Or did we just... And then he saw it. Across the street, on a billboard that had never been there before, a single, glowing eye watched them. And underneath it, a message burned into the screen. Welcome back, pioneers. Keanu's blood ran cold. The architects hadn't stopped them. They had let them go, but only because they were part of the experiment now. And the real question was... Keanu stared at the glowing eye on the billboard. The words, "Welcome back, pioneers," sent an eerie chill down his spine. Elon, silent for the first time in a long while, was processing every possible scenario. His brain was a supercomputer, running simulations in real time, but none of them provided a clear answer. Victor, gripping his tattered notebook, whispered, "Are we really back?" Keanu clenched his jaw. "We need to test it." They stepped forward, cautiously, feeling the familiar pavement beneath their feet. The city looked the same. Bustling people, honking cars, the faint smell of street food wafting through the air. Elon pulled out his phone. No missed calls, no strange messages. Victor flipped through his notebook. The same equations, the same theories. Keanu glanced around, searching for anything out of place. And then he saw it, a man in a suit, standing unnaturally still at the corner of the street, not watching them directly, but waiting. Keanu turned to Elon and Victor. "We're not alone." They approached the man cautiously. He had an emotionless face, hands folded neatly in front of him. As they neared, he spoke without turning his head. "You were not meant to leave." Keanu's fists clenched. "We didn't escape, did we?" The man finally looked at them. "No one ever does." Victor took a step back. Then what was the point of all this? His voice cracked. The notebook? The machines? The tests? The man tilted his head slightly. "To see if you would ask that question." Elon narrowed his eyes. "What are we now?" The man smiled, a small, knowing smile. "You are anomalies." The words hit like a thunderclap. Keanu took a deep breath. "Which means?" The man's eyes flickered, just for a second. It means the system can no longer control you, but it can still watch you. Keanu felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Victor's voice was barely above a whisper. So what do we do now? The man stepped aside, revealing two paths. One was a simple alleyway leading deeper into the city, an ordinary life, pretending none of this had ever happened. The other was a street with no end in sight, stretching far beyond the city skyline, disappearing into something Keanu couldn't describe, a road that was never there before. You can forget. Live as if this was all a dream. The world will not change. The man gestured toward the alley. Or he motioned toward the endless road. You can seek what lies beyond, but once you take that path, there is no coming back. Keanu, Elon, and Victor stood there, staring. One choice meant safety, comfort. The other? The unknown. Keanu looked at Victor. You ready for another adventure? Victor gripped his notebook, took a deep breath, and smiled. Always. Elon smirked. We didn't come all this way to quit now. Without another word, they stepped onto the road, and as they walked forward, the world behind them started to dissolve. The billboard, the man in the suit, the entire city, fading like a memory that never existed. The test wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time they were the ones in control.